on today's show, why women will draw the purse strings of America. Part 1 of this week's series on Mother's Day, long-term care. The long-term care expert, Maria Sarci. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician and Innsmouth. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to the show, Maria.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
I love it when you're here because you are the lady of all that is long-term care, but we're going to not just go long-term care. We're doing a whole week on Mother's Day because I went to Freedom Academy or Freedom Inn, which is a long-term care facility here in the Valley of Phoenix, Arizona, and I noticed it's like 8.5 to 1 female to male.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about long-term care, even though we insure both male and female, the person who's really going to benefit from it more than anybody is going to be mom.
Well, Steve, women in particular, as caregivers throughout their life, oftentimes are there to care for a spouse when he needs care. And oftentimes we find that the female herself is left to her own devices, left with really nobody to be in a position to care for her. And so today, as we look at this aging boomer population and we think about the future of where this population is going, and we look at the rising cost of care, I'm just happy to be talking with you all this week about a focus on women, particularly in May for Mother's Day.
I have seen some statistics, and I'd be interested in your thinking. It's not really a total science. I don't know if the sampling was really that great. But I noticed that they said that sometimes females, geriatric females, have accelerated their need for care because they were caregivers themselves.
Yes.
Do you find that to be true?
I do. You know, when you think about what goes into caring for somebody, the physical and emotional toll that it can take on a spouse, and that individual may progress their own need for care someday because they've been the person that's primarily giving all of the assistance for the daily activities of living, which could involve lifting and moving someone, could involve really being with them 24/7 to ensure that they don't get themselves in harm's way. So yes, it has been found that females in particular can, after providing care to somebody, not only need care, but need it sooner than others.
And I think that care of caring for somebody else accelerates their need for it. Interesting enough, we've been looking at statistics, and if everybody's seen any of my tweets and blogs out on the internet, I've been talking about the #1 risk right now in America in retirement, which is human longevity. We're just living longer. That risk is huge. Longevity risk, it's hard to take things off the table. Part of that is how we do retirement income, but we all know we're going to face some form of long-term care. Now, I've noticed there used to be a stat, I think it's still golden, about 70% of all seniors will use some form of long-term care. I don't know what level, but
True.
70%. Is that still true today?
It is very much. And when you look at who's utilizing care, primarily it's women over men.
I've noticed, I had an article that I just read this morning, I can't believe it's so apropos for the show. This article said that most men disregard their health. They are not as, let's just say, conscious of it and wanted to take care of it. Women will go into the doctor a little bit faster than father will go in. I've noticed that there's a propensity for men to delay all kinds of medical assistance because they're just that way. They've never been a person that talks that way. Have you found that when you're talking about long-term care, that dad is pretty much not there, but mom is? Have you found that to be true?
Most of the time we find that the female clients are more engaged, that there's a little bit more of a desire to learn about care planning and to put something into play. And yes, I would say that majority of the time it is their male counterparts that are not as eager to talk about it, not as eager to find a solution.
All right, so in your research, you've been always in the extended care market in a huge way. You know your products, you know how they're implemented, you know how to talk about it. And I have several lines that I use that are Maria-isms, right? That I've taken from you. I hope you don't mind the plagiarism.
Not at all.
But I'm noticing this trend on mom, focus on women. All of a sudden, long-term care, even though we're writing both, of course, we're focusing our money and benefits and timeline more on women now because they probably, more than likely, from an actuarial point of view, are going to, supersede their husbands. They're going to be there, and by the way, maybe 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you make, Steve. Some 20, 30 years ago, we saw not as many women in the workforce, not as many women working outside of the home, and things are different now. And women are more aware of what longevity is, particularly where a care event can take place because they've been providing care to somebody and also taking care of families at home. So juggling and balancing their outside lives with their lives inside the home and thinking about later in life and what they want for themselves by way of living independently, living on their own terms. Women are just raising a hand and saying, I want to know and I want to learn more.
We're doing this whole week's tribute to Mother's Day as a way to give more education to our advisors so that we can be skill set on the number one person that's probably going to use this contract more than anybody else. And we're looking at mom, and we want our moms to be taken care of, and we want to know how to talk to our female clients and our potential clients. And this is why we're doing this whole week show. When we come back from the break, we're going to start talking about and break this down because this is a huge market, and it's a market that females really want to talk about, and we think we have an opening here. That's a window of opportunity for marketing. We'll be right back in about 30 seconds. Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. I want to talk a little bit about, as we're talking about long-term care and women in specific, I want you to consider over the next 5 to 10 years, the dominant population in long-term care facilities is almost 8.5 to 9 to 1 women. Number two, their baby boomer daughters are watching their mothers and how they're being cared for. This is going to influence how they buy. And why do I bring that up? Because most of these women are summarily terminating their relationship with advisors who did not discuss these things with their female counterparts or their clients. The reason I bring this up is because the actual amount of purse string, the ability for women to control the purse strings of America is so huge. And Maria, I'm looking at one of your stats here. It says 14 trillion in assets and run by women.
Yes.
Talk about that. I mean, I think that most advisors would go, what? That seems huge.
Well, think about the population of women today in their 20, 30-year career now in the workforce themselves, having accumulated assets, and as part of a married couple even, oftentimes females, when they become widowed, they don't have enough of a relationship with the financial advisor or advisor that was working with their spouse all those years. And so there are statistics out there that show that once widowed, women actually will find a different advisor to work with. And we have an opportunity, particularly with care planning, something that strikes a chord with so many women, to just solidify that relationship so that there's connectivity between the advisor that worked with the male spouse to now build a bridge to the female spouse.
Maria, I think we're going to have to do a seminar sometime in the future on corporate courtship and learn how to date our female clients all over again. I'm serious.
I think it's a great idea.
We don't talk correctly. We don't know their feelings. We're not even listening to them.
Well, it's funny you bring up listening because in my experience working with couples, I always find that the female client is really trying to be heard, really trying to get her point across on what matters to her about later in life care. And all too often there could be that eye-to-eye connection between the advisor and the male spouse, but not enough with the female spouse. And thinking about the future road, thinking about how women will live longer than men most of the time, it is important to have that kind of relationship with both spouses.
When you look at the 2008 Society of Actuaries valuation-based tables, relative risk tables, again, it's not the official CSO mortality tables, but it's giving us a glimpse into the future. And you can see some of the numbers that are coming up. Maybe not so much for World War II and Korean females, but baby boomer gals are going to be living a lot longer. And when we watch Willard Scott, we see him every day. Happy birthday to somebody that turns 100. But they're saying now that that will become the fastest growing demographic, those over 100, and it will be dominated by women.
Yes. You know, life expectancy today in 2014 for a female averages about 80 years. And for a male, it's 75 years of age. And so when you look at how many women are in facilities today, it's over 1 million women in this country today in some kind of a care facility. Quite a big number.
At the facility I was referring to earlier in the segment, I was remembering an old song by Dan and I think it was Dan and Dean, who said 2 girls for every boy. Now it's 8 women for every guy in the facility. I mean, just this is really a pretty big number. When we're talking about women and how they approach things, part of retirement planning must have long-term care. I don't know how we can keep talking about retirement planning and not bring up the number one expense load that's going to confront seniors in their life.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think it's like, how can we do retirement modeling and never bring this up?
Well, I think it's a matter of habit. I think it's a matter of just bringing it forward in those discussions. And long-term care sometimes can seem like a rough word, a rough phrase to think about, because when you think of long-term care, you don't necessarily think of a very flowery picture, do you?
No.
No, not at all. And so where we've had some great success is helping clients with care planning as opposed to long-term care, because care planning can revolve around many different things, but ultimately it's about receiving care in a way that is meaningful to that individual. So just asking the question, have you thought about care planning, can open the door to a very deep and rich conversation.
I think we don't know how to ask the right questions as advisors. We know about math. We can calculate it. We know how to take a data collector. But I don't know if I can be pastoral enough to ask the right questions. How do I learn that skill set?
Well, I can share with you what I've seen work well throughout the years that I've been helping individuals, agents, and their clients alike. Asking a question about, have you thought about care planning? Asking questions about, what is your plan in the event that one of you has a fall or one of you needs to receive care? People are thinking about it, Steve. It's not, we're not in the 1990 time era where people had the mindset of, it's not going to happen to me. Today it's more of, it will happen to me, and perhaps the clients just don't know that the advisor can help them with that planning. So simple, short questions. Have you thought about care planning? What and where will the funds come from if you have a care event? Those are just such easy conversation starters.
Well, all this week we're going to be talking about long-term care in light of Mother's Day. That's all the time we have for our show today. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas you hear on our show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? You can view all our past episodes at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you.